The grand sanctum of concordance was built to inspire unity through overwhelming scale, but tonight, its cavernous dimensions served only to amplify the silence of dread. Polished obsidian floors, leagues wide, reflected the shimmering nebulae visible through the vaulted crystalline ceiling, a constant reminder of the galaxy the Vexalius Compact had sworn to govern with benevolent logic. Yet, logic had failed them. High above the assembly floor, suspended in gravitic chairs of softly glowing psionic crystal, sat the delegates of the core compact worlds. Each representative was a monument to their species' biology and philosophy, a living embodiment of the star systems they represented, and each was shrouded in an atmosphere of profound and suffocating fear. At the center of this floating conclave, in the most ornate and elevated chair, sat High Chancellor Zarthus of the Cathar Imperium. His multifaceted eyes, usually swirling with the patient, calculating light of a being who perceived time in geological spans, were now tight, focused on the immense holographic projection that dominated the heart of the sanctum. It was a map of the galaxy, a swirling tapestry of light and color, but a creeping stain marred its perfection. Along the Orion Spur in the uncharted territories humanity called the Veil, dozens of star systems had turned from vibrant green to a stark, sterile gray. The silence was a living thing, a pressure against the carapaces and energy fields of the assembled delegates. It was a silence born not of peace, but of a shared, unutterable horror. It was finally broken by a voice like grinding stones, a sound that carried the weight of mountains and the heat of a planet's core. Warlord Grak of the Urlok, a being of living silicon whose form resembled a barely contained landslide, gestured a jagged crystalline limb at the map. His gravitic chair groaned under his mass and fury. We have debated for cycles. We have analyzed, we have postulated, we have equivocated. While we talk, the plague spreads. This humanity has committed acts of unprovoked, systematic annihilation. They have rendered worlds barren, not conquered, not harvested, but erased. This is not war. It is pest control, and we are the pests. His voice echoed in the vast chamber, each word a hammer blow against the fragile pretense of calm. Our fleets have been dispatched. Our finest strategists have plotted intercepts. And what do they find? Nothing. The ghost ship, this singular vessel they call the Vanguard, appears, scours a system of all biological and complex chemical signatures, and then it vanishes. It folds space in a manner our physicists insist is impossible, leaving behind only sterilized rock and silent starshine. How can we fight a phantom? How can we reason with an apocalypse? From across the circle, a soft, chiming resonance answered, a stark contrast to the warlord's fury. It was emissary Lyra of the Cygnian Ascendancy, a being of pure, contained energy whose form was a constant, gentle cascade of light within a vaguely humanoid containment field. Warlord, your fear is shared by all. Her voice was a melody of pure logic and empathy. But to call them a plague is to assign a motive we do not comprehend. A plague seeks to multiply, to consume. This entity does not. It sterilizes and moves on. It ignores our hails, it evades our patrols, it treats our military might as a child's tantrum and irrelevance. There is a pattern here, a terrifying logic we are failing to grasp. To respond with blind force is to mirror the very ignorance we condemn. She pulsed with a soft, placating blue light, a stark contrast to the burning red of Grak's internal core. Our archives, which hold the histories of 1,000 species, have no precedent for this. A single ship waging a war of extinction, not for territory, not for resources, not for ideology, but for nothing, for the sake of erasure itself. It is a philosophical void, a metaphysical cancer. We must understand it before we can confront it. High Chancellor Zarthus shifted his weight, his chitinous plates clicking softly, a sound that drew the attention of the entire conclave. He had remained silent, his ancient mind processing the conflicting arguments, the rising panic, the scent of fear that even the chamber's advanced atmospheric purifiers could not scrub away. He was Cathar, a species that built its empire on patience, on understanding the deep currents of causality that govern the galaxy. They had seen empires rise and fall, species ascend and wither. They had learned that the most dangerous foe was not the one with the greatest weapons, but the one whose motives were utterly alien. And humanity, the reclusive, quiet species that had kept to its small corner of the galaxy for their entire history, had suddenly become the most alien enigma of all. They had breached their self-imposed isolation with a single vessel that was now methodically unmaking the galaxy, on a world at a time. The Compact had sent envoys, fleets, and warnings. They had been met with a profound, impenetrable silence. The human ship did not respond, did not acknowledge, did not deviate. It simply continued its cold, sterile work. The reports from the forward fleets are disquieting, Zarthus finally spoke, his voice a dry, rasping whisper that commanded absolute attention. The human ship does not engage in combat. When our armadas surround it, it does not power weapons. It does not raise shields in the conventional sense. The vessel, the Vanguard, simply ceases to be in that location and reappears light years away, already beginning its next cleansing cycle. Our temporal physicists report that it does not create a wormhole or a warp field. Instead, it seems to briefly unexist, shedding causality and reinserting itself into spacetime at a location of its choosing. We are firing cannons at a thought, an idea, and it is an idea that is erasing us. He gestured with a long, slender manipulator claw at the holographic map. The worlds they have targeted are not random. They are all nascent biospheres. Worlds with complex organic soups with the first stirrings of multicellular life. Worlds we had designated as protected cradles, future members of this very compact. They are not destroying civilizations. They are destroying potential itself. They are murdering the future. A wave of murmurs rippled through the delegates. The idea was more horrifying than simple conquest. This was not an act of war. It was an act of cosmic pruning. A low, guttural growl came from the delegate of the FNAR, a species of silicon-based predators who saw the galaxy in terms of hunter and prey. It is a challenge, a display of power. They are the new apex predator, showing us they can devour our young. They are drawing a line, declaring their territory. The next worlds will be inhabited. Then they will come for us. This sentiment resonated with many in the chamber. It was a motive they could understand, a primal fear that resonated across biological and energetic divides. The fear of being replaced, of being deemed obsolete by a newer, more ruthless power. The fear that their long, peaceful reign as the galaxy's shepherds was coming to a violent end. The Compact, for all its power and wisdom, was an institution built on predictable rules of engagement, on shared assumptions about the sanctity of life and the logic of self-interest. The humans operated outside all of them. Lyra's light flickered, a sign of her deep distress. But to what end? They have not expanded their territory by a single light year. They claim no resources from the worlds they have purged. Their actions gain them nothing tangible. No, this is something else, something deeper and more terrifying. We have underestimated them. For centuries, we saw them as primitives, content with their single star system, obsessed with their internal squabbles and their crude physical forms. We pitied their short lifespans, their fragile biology. We sent observers who reported back tales of art, of emotion, of irrational conflicts, and equally irrational acts of altruism. We dismissed them as cosmic children, loud, chaotic, and ultimately harmless. Her light dimmed. We were wrong. While we were pitying them, they were mastering the very fabric of reality. While we built empires, they were learning to edit the universe. And now they have emerged not as children, but as something else. Something we have no name for. Zarthus focused his multifaceted gaze on the grayed-out systems. The human ship was methodical. It moved along a precise, calculated vector, a wave of absolute sterility expanding from their home system, Saul. It was this precision that chilled him to his core. It was not the act of a mad race, but the cold, deliberate work of a gardener weeding a garden. He remembered the last intelligence report, a garbled, terrified transmission from a Cathar scout ship that had gotten closer than any other before being destroyed. Not by weapons fire, but by proximity. The scout's final sensory logs were not of energy signatures or explosions, but of a creeping quiet. The fundamental constants of the universe in its immediate vicinity had begun to shift, to dampen. The laws of thermodynamics had become suggestions. The very information that held matter together had started to fray. The scout ship had not been blown apart, it had been unwritten. "They are not fighting us," Zarthus whispered, the realization solidifying in his mind with the cold finality of a dying star. "They do not even acknowledge us as a threat. We are simply in the way." This was the ultimate horror. To the humans, the combined might of the Vexalius Compact, the fleets that could crack continents, the energy beings who could converse with pulsars, the ancient insectoids who remembered the birth of this galactic arm, were nothing more than background noise. An obstacle to be ignored, bypassed, and if necessary, erased with the same dispassionate efficiency as a world of microbes. The war was not against the Compact. The war was against life itself, and the humans were its champions. Warlord Grak's internal light flared to a furious, incandescent white. "Then we will make them acknowledge us. We will gather the Grand Armada, every warship from every member world. We will converge on their home system. We will put a blade to the throat of their cradle and force them to answer for their crimes. They think us irrelevant. We will show them the power of a galaxy united in righteous fury." The proposal hung in the air, seductive in its simplicity and its promise of action over agonizing uncertainty. It appealed to the pride and power of every delegate present. To meet this existential threat with the full, terrible force of their civilization, it was the logical response. It was the honorable response. And yet, as Zarthus looked into the shimmering form of emissary Lyra, he saw the deep, resonant pulse of doubt. She was right. There was a piece of the puzzle they were missing. A terrible, fundamental truth that was driving the humans to commit these unspeakable acts. To attack them blindly was to fall into a trap of their own making, a trap of arrogance and fear. He could feel the tide of opinion turning in the conclave, the delegates leaning towards Grak's call for total war. He had to slow them down to buy time for understanding, even if it cost them more worlds. He raised a manipulator claw, the gesture calling for silence. "Before we commit our entire civilization to a war against an enemy we do not understand," he began, his voice low and steady, "we will make one final attempt. The fleets will not attack their home world. They will converge on the Vanguard's next predicted target. We will create a wall of ships, a barrier of pure physical presence so vast that they cannot ignore it, cannot bypass it. We will force them to stop. We will force them to speak. We will demand an answer. And if their answer is silence, or a continuation of their monstrous work, then we will give Warlord Grak his war. But let it be known that we did so only after exhausting every path to peace, every hope for reason." His gaze swept across the assembly, challenging any to dispute his logic. The fury in Grak's core subsided to a sullen, smoldering glow. Even he could not argue against the appearance of wisdom, the veneer of rational process. The vote was cast, a cascade of silent, shimmering lights of assent. The Grand Armada would be mobilized. The galaxy would hold its breath and await the confrontation that would either save it or shatter it into cosmic dust. The stage was set for the final, desperate plea for reason in the face of an incomprehensible apocalypse. The system of Cygnus X1 was a place of violent beauty, a binary star system where a blue supergiant was slowly being devoured by its black hole companion. Accretion disks of incandescent gas painted the void in hues of impossible color, a cosmic mural of creation and destruction. It was here, on the only stable planet in the system, a world designated Cygnus X1A, that the Vexalius Compact had chosen to make their stand. The planet was a nascent world, its oceans a teeming soup of complex amino acids, the very first sparks of life beginning to ignite in its hydrothermal vents. It was a perfect symbol of the potential the humans seemed so intent on destroying. And now, it was the most heavily fortified location in the history of the galaxy. A fleet of such impossible scale had been assembled that it dimmed the light of the distant supergiant. Ships from 1,000 worlds formed a layered sphere of impenetrable defense around the planet. There were the jagged, asteroid-like dreadnoughts of the Urlok, mountains of weaponized rock. The sleek, organic bioships of the Cathar, humming with psionic energy. The shimmering, non-corporeal fleets of the Cygnian Ascendancy, existing as pure energy patterns in the vacuum. Countless other vessels, each unique to its creator species, formed a tapestry of united power, a physical declaration that this line would not be crossed. High Chancellor Zarthus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Patience of Ages. Before him, a panoramic view screen showed the silent, majestic gathering of force. He had never seen its like. It was the physical manifestation of the Compact's will, a sight that should have filled him with pride. Instead, it filled him with a cold, hollow dread. It felt like an immune system response, a massive, panicked rush of antibodies to contain a single, terrifyingly efficient virus. The tension on the bridge was a palpable force. His Cathar crew, normally so calm and deliberate, moved with a rigid, suppressed anxiety. They were all watching the sensor readings, watching the empty space where the human ship was predicted to appear. The moment stretched into an eternity. The silence of the void was deeper, more profound than any he had ever experienced. It was the silence of a held breath, the pause before the thunderclap. He found his gaze drawn to the reflection in the view screen. He saw his own ancient, insectoid form, and behind him, the shimmering, contained light of emissary Lyra, who had joined him on the flagship. "They will come," Lyra's melodic voice stated, not as a prediction but as a certainty. "Their pattern is flawless. Their logic is absolute. They will not be deterred by this show of force." Zarthus did not turn. "It is not intended to deter them, emissary. It is intended to contain them, to hold them in place long enough for a dialogue to be initiated. Their drive system may be able to unexist from a single point, but can it do so when surrounded by a gravity well generated by a fleet of this magnitude? Our physicists believe it cannot. They will be trapped. They will be forced to acknowledge us." He spoke the words with a confidence he did not feel. The humans had broken their understanding of physics before. There was no guarantee they would not do so again. Warlord Grak's face appeared on a secondary screen, his craggy features a mask of grim satisfaction. Chancellor, all fleets are in position. Weapons are charged. We are ready to greet these gardeners with the fire of 1,000 suns. Zarthus acknowledged him with a slight inclination of his head. Patience, Warlord. We proceed as agreed. No hostile action until they have demonstrated their intent. Open a universal hailing frequency. Broadcast the Compact's declaration of peace and the demand for parley on all channels in every language, every mathematical constant we know. The order was given. A wave of energy, a plea for reason, radiated out from the fleet, washing over the silent, waiting space. It was a message of hope cast into an ocean of dread. And then it happened. Not with a flash of light, not with the roar of an engine, but with a subtle, sickening lurch in reality itself. Space twisted. For a brief, terrifying moment, the black hole of Cygnus X1 seemed to look back at them. The laws of physics groaned under an immense, unseen strain, and then in the geometric center of their vast formation it appeared. The Vanguard. It was not a large ship. In fact, by the standards of the Compact's dreadnoughts, it was shockingly small, a sleek, featureless wedge of a material so black it seemed to absorb the light of the nearby stars. It had no visible weapon ports, no glowing engine signatures, no viewports. It was a sliver of perfect, silent geometry, an affront to the chaotic beauty of the cosmos around it. It simply floated there, utterly still, utterly unimpressed by the apocalyptic might surrounding it. The bridge of the patience of ages was a storm of information. Gravity fluctuations off the scale. Spacetime is warping around the vessel. No energy readings, no radiation. It's a hole in the universe. They are not responding to our hails, Chancellor. The reports came in, each more impossible than the last. The human ship was not merely present. It was imposing its own reality on the space around it. The fleet's gravitic anchors, designed to hold their position against the pull of a black hole, strained to keep the ships from being drawn towards the tiny vessel. It was as if the Vanguard had more mass than the entire armada combined. Zarthus watched, his 3 hearts beating a frantic, dissonant rhythm. This was not technology as they knew it. This was something else entirely. It was the deliberate manipulation of the fundamental forces of existence. Hold your positions, he commanded, his voice tight. Do not fire, Grak's furious image reappeared. They are mocking us. This is an insult to our power. Chancellor, give the order. Before Zarthus could respond, a new alert chimed, one that cut through the cacophony of the bridge. Chancellor, we are detecting a transmission from the human vessel. It's audio, a single repeating tone. The communications officer worked frantically, his manipulator claws flying across a console. I am attempting to decode it. It is not a language. It is a mathematical sequence, a countdown. A cold dread, colder than the vacuum of space, settled over Zarthus. A countdown. Not to a negotiation, not to a surrender. A countdown to the cleansing. Lyra's light flickered violently. They do not care, our fleet, our message, our very existence. It changes nothing. They are proceeding. Grak roared in fury. This is their answer, the only answer they will ever give. We must strike now, destroy them before they complete their countdown. Zarthus knew with a sudden, soul-crushing certainty that Grak was right. They had offered peace, and the response was a timer to annihilation. The hope for a peaceful resolution, for understanding, died in that moment. He had led his people, his entire civilization, to this precipice, and there was no path forward but the one of wrath. He took no satisfaction. Tian in it, only a profound, hollow grief for the galaxy that might have been. Warlord Grak, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. You have your war. The order was relayed. All ships open fire. For a moment the universe held its breath. Then a sun was born in the heart of the Cygnus system. A torrent of energy, a storm of matter and antimatter, a wave of pure destructive force unleashed from thousands of warships, converged on the single, silent point of the Vanguard. It was a level of firepower that could have atomized a continent, boiled an ocean, cracked a planet to its core. The vacuum itself screamed as lances of coherent light, bolts of plasma, and waves of gravitic distortion struck the small, black ship from every conceivable angle. The resulting explosion was blinding, a nova of pure, untamed power that momentarily outshone the blue supergiant. On the bridge of the Patience of Ages, the crew shielded their eyes as the viewscreen bleached to pure white. Alarms blared as the shockwave of the blast washed over them, the flagship's immense shields groaning under the strain. When the light cleared and the viewscreen could once again resolve an image, a collective gasp swept through the bridge. A gasp of disbelief, of shock, of a fear so profound it bordered on religious awe. The Vanguard was still there, unscathed, unmarked. It floated in the exact same spot, the swirling vortex of weaponized energy parting around it as if it were a rock in a stream. It had not raised a shield. It had simply refused to be hit. The weapon's fire, the combined might of the galaxy's greatest powers, had not been blocked or absorbed. It had been ignored. The space the ship occupied was simply not available to the energy streams. It existed on a plane of reality where their weapons had no meaning. A deep, horrified silence fell over the fleet. The countdown from the human ship continued, its calm, mathematical precision a stark, terrifying contrast to the violent, impotent fury of the compact. And then, just as the countdown reached its final tone, the Vanguard acted. It did not fire a weapon. It did not move. It simply expanded. A wave of shimmering, pearlescent energy bloomed from the ship, not an explosion, but a gentle, silent wave of transformation. It moved at the speed of light, washing over the nearby Urloke dreadnoughts. Where the wave passed, the jagged, kilometers-long ships of weaponized rock simply ceased. They did not explode. They did not melt. They dissolved into a cloud of component atoms, their complex structures unwritten from existence in an instant. The wave continued to expand, silent, beautiful, and utterly lethal. Panic erupted across the fleet. Ships scrambled to escape the expanding sphere of dissolution, but it was too fast. The Cathar bioships, the Cygnian energy fleets, the vessels of 1,000 proud species, were erased, their crews given not even a moment to register their own annihilation. On the bridge of the Patience of Ages, Zarthus watched the wave of absolute entropy approach, a silent, shimmering wall of death. He saw the end of his civilization, the futility of their rage, the sheer, unutterable alienness of their foe. He closed his multifaceted eyes. But the end did not come. Instead, a new voice spoke, not over the comms, but directly into the minds of every living being in the fleet. It was a human voice, calm, clear, resonant with an authority that dwarfed the fury of warlords and the wisdom of chancellors. "Cease hostilities," the voice said. "We are not your enemy." The wave of dissolution stopped, frozen in place, a shimmering, translucent sphere of death held in perfect stasis a mere 1,000 kilometers from the flagship. The countdown had not been for an attack. It had been a timer for the completion of their primary objective, the cleansing of the planet, and now with their work presumably done, they were finally speaking. On the main view screen, the image of the Vanguard was replaced by a view of a simple, starkly lit room. In the center stood a single being, a human. It was bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, its form encased in a simple, dark uniform. It had no visible carapace, no energy field, no obvious biological weapons. It was a creature of soft flesh and fragile bone, a being that should have been crushed by the sheer psychic pressure of the moment. And yet it stood with a stillness, a calm that was more intimidating than any display of force. Its face, with its paired eyes and small mouth, was unreadable, but its gaze seemed to pierce through the screen, to look directly into the soul of High Chancellor Zarthus. "I am Captain Eva Restover of the Alliance vessel Vanguard," the human said, her voice the same one that had resonated in their minds. "You have just declared war on the sole guardians of sentient life in this galaxy. We suggest you reconsider." The sheer, monumental arrogance of the statement was breathtaking. They had just wiped out a significant portion of the Grand Armada, had sterilized dozens of worlds, and now they claimed to be guardians. Grak's apoplectic roar filled the comm channel. "Guardians, you are murderers, genocidal monsters, you have destroyed countless lives." The human, Captain Rostova, did not even glance away from her direct gaze at Zarthus. Her expression did not change. "We have destroyed no lives," she stated, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "There was no life on those worlds." "Not anymore." Lyra's shimmering form pulsed with a question. "We scanned those worlds ourselves. They were teeming with nascent life, presentient but alive by every definition in our archives." For the first time, a flicker of something crossed the human's face. It was not anger, not pride. It was a deep, profound weariness, a sadness that seemed older than her species. "Your definitions are inadequate," she said. "Your sensors are blind. You see the flesh, but you do not see the soul. You see the body, but you do not see the information that gives it meaning." She raised a hand, and the view behind her shifted. It showed a microscopic view of a cell, a complex, beautiful structure dividing and multiplying. It was the very image of life. "This is what your sensors see," Captain Rostova said. Then the image shifted again. The cell was still there, physically unchanged, but a subtle, sickening gray corruption was spreading through it. The internal structures, the very code of its existence, was dissolving. It was not dying. It was being erased. The information that made it a living thing was being replaced by null data, by a meaningless static. "And this is what you are blind to, a contagion not of the body but of the mind, a blight that targets the foundational patterns of consciousness. It doesn't kill, it unwrites. It spreads silently, invisibly from world to world, carried on light, on gravity waves, on the very fabric of spacetime. The worlds we sterilized were already gone. Their biospheres were nothing more than echoes, hollow shells of matter whose conscious potential had been scooped out, leaving only a puppet of flesh that would soon collapse into undifferentiated sludge. We were not destroying life. We were cauterizing a wound to prevent a galactic gangrene. A stunned, horrified silence descended upon the fleet. The concept was so alien, so far beyond their understanding of biology or metaphysics, that it was difficult to even process. A plague of the soul, an informational contagion. Zarthus stared at the images, at the creeping gray blight, and felt a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of space. He remembered the final, garbled transmission from the Cathar scout ship. The report of the laws of physics fraying, of information losing its coherence. They had witnessed the blight firsthand and had not understood what they were seeing. "Why did you not tell us?" Zarthus whispered, the question an admission of their own catastrophic failure of imagination. "Why the silence? Why the destruction?" Captain Restova's gaze softened just for a moment, and in it Zarthus saw a flicker of something that looked like pity. "Because you would not have believed us. Because you would have debated. You would have formed committees, run simulations, and demanded proof that your own limited senses could not provide. While you talked, the blight would have spread beyond any hope of containment. We know this because our own history taught us this lesson. We are a species born of argument, of doubt, of 1,000 conflicting perspectives. Unity is not our natural state. It is a choice we have to make again and again in the face of extinction." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "We did not have time for a debate. We had only time for action. The lives of every sentient being in this galaxy, including our own, depended on it. We broadcast no warnings because the blight learns. It adapts. Any complex transmission about its nature could have inadvertently carried its code, spreading the very disease we sought to contain. Silence and sterility were our only weapons." Her gaze hardened again, the weary soldier replacing the tired philosopher. "We did not start a war with your galaxy. We started a war for it. We have been fighting it alone in the darkness for generations, ever since we first discovered the blight in the ruins of a precursor civilization that it had utterly consumed. The Vanguard is not a warship. It is a quarantine vessel, a scalpel used to excise a cancer before it consumes the patient. The worlds we cleansed were sacrifices made to save trillions. We took no pleasure in it. We have mourned every single spark of potential we were forced to extinguish, but we did what was necessary." The wave of dissolution that surrounded the fleet held its position, a testament to the power she described. It was not a weapon of conquest. It was a surgical tool of absolute, final sterilization. E-Compact had brought an army to a hospital and had tried to kill the surgeon. Zarthus looked at the faces of his fellow delegates on the secondary screens. He saw Grack's stony silence, his fury replaced by a horrified, dawning comprehension. He saw Lyra's light pulsing with a deep, resonant sorrow, not for the fleet they had lost, but for the profound, tragic misunderstanding that had led them to this point. The humans were not monsters. They were tragic heroes, forced to commit monstrous acts for the sake of a cause so vast and so terrible that the Compact had not even been aware of its existence. They had been so focused on the sanctity of nascent life that they had failed to see the deeper sanctity of conscious life, the very thing the humans were fighting to protect. "Show us," Zarthus said, his voice quiet but firm. "Give us the sensor modifications. Allow us to see what you see." Captain Restova nodded slowly. "We will, but be warned, the truth is not a pleasant sight." A stream of data, complex and elegant, flowed from the Vanguard to the remaining ships of the Compact fleet. It was not weapon schematics or tactical information. It was a series of recalibration protocols for their sensor arrays, a new set of eyes with which to see the universe. On the bridge of the Patience of Ages, the Cathar technicians worked frantically to integrate the new data. The main viewscreen flickered, the image of the cosmos shifting as the new sensory filters came online. And then they saw it. The galaxy they had known, the beautiful, vibrant tapestry of life and light, was gone. In its place was a vision of cosmic horror. The gray blight was not confined to the sterilized systems. It was everywhere, a faint, almost imperceptible web of corruption, a creeping stain on the fabric of reality. It clung to the edges of nebulae, it coiled in the hearts of distant galaxies, and most terrifyingly, it was already present in their own systems. Faint traces of it could be seen clinging to their border worlds, a silent, creeping infection they had been utterly blind to. The sterilized systems were not the source of the plague. They were simply the places where it had grown dense enough to consume the planet's informational soul. The planet below them, Cygnus X1a, was now a sterile gray orb on the human sensors. But on their newly calibrated ones, they saw the ghost of what it had been. They saw the blight, a thick, suffocating shroud of informational static, completely enveloping the world. The human ship had not destroyed its nascent life. It had mercy-killed it, freeing the matter from the informational parasite that had already consumed its future. A wave of collective psychic shock and grief rolled through the fleet. Every commander, every delegate was now faced with the same terrible truth. They had been living in a house that was on fire, completely unaware of the smoke, and had just tried to kill the only firefighter who had come to save them. The war was over before it had even begun, not because of a victory or a defeat, but because the entire premise of the conflict had been a lie, a catastrophic failure of perception. The enemy was not the human ship that stood silently before them. The enemy was the silent, creeping nothingness that was poised to inherit the galaxy. The grand sanctum of concordance was silent once more, but this was a different silence. The silence of dread had been replaced by the silence of profound, humbling revelation. The great holographic map still dominated the chamber, but now it showed the galaxy as the humans saw it, laced with the ghostly, terrifying tendrils of the gray blight. High Chancellor Zarthus stood not in his elevated chair, but on the floor of the assembly, a gesture of humility. Beside him, in a containment field that allowed her to interact on a physical level, was the projection of Captain Eva Rostova. The delegates of the compact were assembled, their gravitic chairs lowered to the same level. The hierarchy was gone, replaced by the grim equality of a shared, existential threat. Warlord Grak, his rocky form seemingly smaller, less imposing, bowed his head, a gesture of immense significance for his proud, warrior race. "We owe you an apology, Captain Rostova," he grumbled, the words costing him more than any lost battle. "And a debt. We were blind, and in our blindness we became the aggressors. The Urlok offer our fleets, our lives, to your war. The Blight will find that stone and fury are not so easily unwritten." One by one, the other delegates echoed the sentiment. The Cygnian Ascendancy offered their mastery of energy and their vast computational resources. The Cathar offered their ancient wisdom, their psionic navigators who could sense the subtle wrongness of the Blight. 1,000 species, 1,000 unique talents were laid at the feet of the human captain. An alliance was being forged, not in the light of victory, but in the shared darkness of a terrifying new reality. Rostova listened to each pledge, her expression calm, but her eyes held the faint glimmer of something Zarthus recognized as hope, a fragile, weary hope. "Humanity accepts your alliance," she said, her voice carrying a weight that belied her simple words. "We have fought this war alone for too long. We have made terrible choices in the darkness, and we have carried the burden of those choices in silence. To have allies, to have friends, it is a feeling my generation has never known." She raised her hand, and the holographic map shifted. "The Blight is not a natural phenomenon. It is a weapon, an echo of a war fought between precursor races on a scale we can barely comprehend billions of years ago. We believe one side created the Blight to erase the other. We do not know if they succeeded, or if they simply annihilated each other in the process. The Vanguard's mission was twofold: containment and the search for the source. The search for a counterweapon, a way to reverse the damage, to rewrite the erased information back into existence. She zoomed in on a sector of the galaxy shrouded in a dense, dark nebula, a place known to the compact as the Shadow Caldera. "Our long-range scans, combined with analysis of the Blight's propagation patterns, have led us to believe that its central command, or its origin point, lies hidden within this nebula, a place your star charts label as empty space." Lyra's energy form pulsed brightly. "That region is impenetrable to our sensors. It absorbs all energy, all scans. We have always assumed it to be a gravitational anomaly, a region of crushed spacetime." Rostova nodded. "It is, but not a natural one. The precursors who deployed the Blight were masters of reality manipulation. They hid their weapons core in a pocket of manufactured spacetime, shielded from conventional detection. But the very act of fighting the Blight, of sterilizing worlds with our reality-altering technology, has created ripples, echoes. We believe our recent actions at Cygnus X1, the massive expenditure of energy from your fleet and the defensive field of the Vanguard, have sent a powerful enough ripple through the fabric of the cosmos to disturb it." As she spoke, a new alert flashed on the holographic map, originating from the heart of the Shadow Caldera. It was a signal, a single powerful, coherent pulse of energy cutting through the nebula's shroud. It was not a random burst, it was structured, complex. It was a message. A communications officer from the Cathar flagship patched his voice into the sanctum. "Chancellor, we are receiving a transmission from the Shadow Caldera. It is ancient. Its structure is unlike anything we have ever seen. We are trying to translate it." A tense silence fell over the chamber as the combined computational power of the Alliance and the Compact was brought to bear on the ancient signal. For long minutes there was nothing but the quiet hum of the sanctum. Then the translated message appeared in the air, written in the shared script of the Compact, stark and chilling. It was not a message of peace. It was not a warning. It was a status update. BIOLITHIC weapon system, Gray Blight, Phase 1 containment protocol has failed. Widespread organic resistance detected. Automated response, activating Phase 2. Galactic sterilization protocol initiated. Target, all NON-compliant carbon BASED information SYSDEMS. A wave of cold shock washed through the sanctum. They had not merely found the Blight's origin. They had woken it up. Their struggle, their very resistance, had been interpreted by an ancient, implacable machine as a trigger for the next stage of its horrifying function. The single human ship had not started a war with the galaxy. It had stumbled into the final act of a war that had ended billions of years ago, and in its desperate attempt to save everyone, had just alerted the automated war machine that its job was not yet finished. The map of the galaxy began to change. From the heart of the Shadow Caldera, a new stain began to spread, far faster, far more aggressive than the slow creep of the Blight. It was a wave of pure, weaponized command, a signal telling every trace of the Blight in the galaxy to activate, to consume, to erase. But that was not the end of the message. As the Phase 2 activation signal pulsed outwards, a second, weaker signal piggybacked on its carrier wave, a hidden message, a ghost in the machine. The translators worked frantically, isolating it. This message was different. It was not the cold, machine logic of the weapon. It was filled with desperation, with sorrow, with a final, desperate plea. It was from the other side of the ancient war. The creators, not of the weapon, but of the civilization it had been designed to destroy. "If you are receiving this," the new message began, the translated text shimmering with a profound, tragic beauty, "then the devourer has awakened. We are gone. We failed. Our every effort. To create a counteragent, a true cure for the informational plague, was met with failure. It unwrites the very thoughts required to defeat it. But we did not leave you defenseless. We could not destroy the weapon, so we built a shield, a sanctuary. The coordinates are encoded in this message. It is a place outside of conventional reality, a haven where the logic of the Blight cannot reach. Bring the survivors, preserve the spark of consciousness. And know that the great story of the cosmos does not end in silence. It ends in memory." The message faded, leaving behind a set of coordinates and a profound, echoing silence. They had been given a choice, a terrible, impossible choice. To stand and fight a war against a foe that consumed thought itself, a war they were almost certainly destined to lose. Or to flee, to abandon the galaxy to the silent plague, and to carry the memory of a billion worlds to a new, unknown home. Captain Rostova looked at Zarthus, her human face a mask of grim resolve. The weariness was gone, replaced by a fire that seemed to burn away all doubt. "We have never known a galaxy at peace," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound strength. "My people were born in conflict. We have fought ourselves, our world, and the darkness between the stars. We do not know how to run. We only know how to fight." Zarthus looked at the combined might of his people, the assembled delegates of the Vexalius Compact. He saw their fear, but underneath it, he saw a new, unfamiliar resolve. They had been a civilization of peace, of logic, of careful deliberation. But the humans had shown them that some threats could not be debated, could not be legislated away. Some threats had to be met with a single, unified, unyielding will. He turned back to the human captain, a faint, dry smile clicking on his mandibles. "It seems, Captain Rostova," he said, his voice resonating through the grand sanctum, "that you have not just started a war for the galaxy. You have given it a reason to become one." The final choice had not yet been made, but in the heart of that chamber, a new understanding had been born. Humanity, the strange, chaotic, violent species from the galactic fringe, had brought the end upon them. But in doing so, they had also brought the beginning. The beginning of a single, unified galactic will, standing together against the encroaching silence, ready to fight for their right to exist, to think, to be. The great story did not have to end in memory. It could be forged anew in the fires of a war for the soul of the universe itself.